This is TWiT.
I really want to talk a little bit about some of the Sony phones that you recently reviewed, because I saw you're one of the few people that actually covered these phones kind of in a way that I knew that they were being covered, to be honest with you. We're talking about the Sony Xperia 5 II and the Sony Xperia 1 II. We're going to do a little more show and tell. Juan still has his camera set up so that we can kind of look at them. But Juan, I would love for you to just kind of walk us through these two phones, just some of the highlights of them that you found while you're reviewing them, because we get a lot of questions about Sony phones, but we don't always have a lot of things to say about it, either because the phones aren't really available in the US or it's just something gets announced and then it kind of falls and, by the wayside. So I don't know. You want to talk a little bit about your experience with these two phones?
Absolutely.
What we can
unfortunately, I just had to send the Xperia 5 back. So this is the Xperia 1 Mark II. This is one of my
that's
favorite
how you say
phones.
It. I totally butchered that.
Year. I mean, there's no right way, but I kind of feel like 1 Mark II. And you start saying Mark II, and it kind of sounds like you're talking about Iron Man armor. I really feel like,
I think I'm talking about a Canon SLR. Like, for me, it can be very
confusing you're like a Sony Alpha, and it is exceptionally clear that Sony is this is going to be tough. There's such a mirror finish on the phone that my poor Panasonic probably won't be able to focus on this very well.
Or did I write? Is this the one with the quad, or this is the triple? No, this is the quad camera is the Xperia 1 Mark II, correct?
That's right. So we've got 3 main camera sensors for photography, and then there's also a time of flight, a depth tracking sensor.
There we go. Burke's zooming in for those watching the video feed.
You can get the Zeiss label on that. Good job,
It looks like a long pill with 4 sensors plugged in there, plus 2 other sensors on top of the pill area. Are those just flashes?
This is a flash, and this is, I think, a light detection or something that kind of helps for metering.
No.
Sony phones are the most camera-like. So when I'm messing up my camera autofocus. All right. So when you're handling a Sony, it is just abundantly clear that they are working with the Alpha team at Sony very close. The Xperia team is no longer, I think, flying completely solo. And there have even been a few more conversations with Sony PR where they're bringing up things like PlayStation support and how you connect it to a DualShock, a PlayStation controller.
Well, that's a big deal now, right? I mean, we've got Xbox integration on some Android phones. We've got Stadia, which is supposed to become a thing somehow. But the idea is there in the ether that this is something.
Oh, absolutely.
That's going to be pushed on us to kind of adopt.
And so for a certain phone company announcing today that they're bringing out a phone with flat and angular sides, I mean, I feel like Sony kind of beat them to the punch. And then they talked about how you're going to get 4K video, and I feel like Sony kind of beat them to the punch. And it all comes down to some of the absolute best photography interfaces I think you can find.
Is that the camera UI, the stock camera UI that we're looking at right now?
So there are now 3 apps on a Sony. This is the Photo Pro app, and it really is. I mean, there's no shutter button on the screen. You hold it like a little rangefinder, where the dedicated shutter button on the side of the phone is how you actually take the photo, and it's absolutely wonderful. There's never that opportunity, that moment where. Come on, I'm trying to get the camera to focus. There's never that moment where you're trying to do something on like a Samsung or an LG, and you accidentally swipe. And it shifts you from like photos to video. Something really annoying. These Sonys now are just so hyper focused on getting that kind of photography done. It really is a joy to shoot with, and it really does feel like you are shooting on a Sony Alpha. It's immediately familiar if you've ever used one of their cameras. So I know a lot of people say like, oh well, it's not very good for auto modes, but their metering and their exposure adjustments are as straightforward and as simple as they can get. Like, I'm in program mode here, just like you would have the dial on a regular camera. And if you want to go full green box auto mode, you can. If you've ever handled a camera, you know what this is going to do.
In terms of shooting, again, we talk about the auto mode on the Pixel. It's very like 1-2. Point and shoot, you get the photo that you want as long as it's in focus. My experience with Sony phones of the past were that the camera hardware would be there, but the software just wasn't giving me what I wanted.
Yeah.
So are we getting actual results from having all of these lenses piped into this phone? Like, is this something that somebody would want to consider over a Pixel device?
So, I mean, I am immediately gonna sort of piggyback on that idea where a Sony phone is the least familiar. If you're comfortable with how an iPhone or a Pixel works, you're going to pick up a Sony, and it's not going to feel like anything else that you've been used to. So the Xperia camera app is very much what you're describing. In the Xperia camera app, it's kind of you are removed from the decision-making process, full auto kind of situation. And, you might even tap to focus and the phone will just say, no, that's not where you want to focus. You want to focus over here instead, and kind of just take that out of your control. The video in the Xperia camera app is full. I mean, again, it's about as full auto as you can make that video. What's interesting is then when you go into Photo Pro or Cinema Pro, you have the exact opposite. You have the most complete collection of controls and of metering and of information getting fed back to you. So you kind of have bookends. You kind of have bookends where you don't really get to fight the Sony Xperia app, but then if you want to have the best sort of look over your composition, then you come to the Cinema Pro and the Photo Pro. And I haven't even shown you guys the Cinema Pro yet. It's a separate look here, where you get this cinema-wide crop. It's shooting HDR. You can shoot 60 frames per second. You can even control a rack
interface.
focus.
That looks like a professional app.
Oh, yeah.
Like something that I would need time to learn.
It's totally built on like Sony Venice cameras. But like right here, what I'm showing is you can kind of preset a rack focus where you can move from one focus point to the other, and it'll automatically just sort of slide through.
Wow.
And you can set up a very cinematic pull, a focus pull, just like you would on a professional grade camera. And it's those little considerations. It's really, I mean, yeah. But I mean, it is, there's literally nothing like shooting on a Sony. But that also means you kind of need to treat it like a camera and give it just that extra window to become more familiar. The rest of this is wonderfully simple, sort of stock Android. It's the tallest, skinniest screen that you can get. It's a UHD resolution display with it's got this kind of motion smoothing trick where black frame insertion tries to smooth out how you interact with the device. It's just really pretty, very unique, and it's an expensive phone. I'm not trying to say like, oh, well, if you're out there shopping a Galaxy, switch it. Depending on retailer, it's $1,200 to $1,300 in the United States. So it's pricey, but it's also one of the most complete options. Wireless charging. It has a headphone jack for RON. You can still throw in a memory card. There is no more pixel dense display on any phone on the market. Beastly powerful with that Snapdragon 865. And then Sony absolutely leads the way for power control. So they've got adaptive battery charging like a lot of other manufacturers have. This also has a feature called HS Power Control, heat suppression power control, where when you plug a cable in, it won't charge the battery. It'll only power the phone, so your battery doesn't run hot while you're using it, kind of like a laptop. And it's like, that's a feature that should be on every phone. And currently, I believe the only other device that has something similar is an Asus. So it really is a very unique multimedia and content creation kind of experience. And if you're really looking at something that, you might want to make content, you might want to like shoot or record audio or produce a podcast all out of your phone. it's like Sony and LG are some of the best options for having that expanded list of controls. So what I'm hoping is that we'll also see some additional gaming features kind of coming to their game center, and that's more what the Xperia 5 is focusing on, is having that higher refresh rate display, being able to kind of more fluidly play certain apps and games, and then the UI gets a lot sleeker because of that higher refresh rate screen. But Sony's making some really strong arguments for an alternative device to what we've kind of accepted as sort of core or stock Android.
Wow. Juan, I really appreciate you walking us through this enormous just phone. It's an enormous package, I should say, because it just has so much bundled in there. Now I'm very curious, before we sort of move on from Sony, kind of the big question that I've always had is, who is buying these phones and where are they? Can you answer that question for us?
Well, I mean, I just wanted to say real quick, in terms of saying something's enormous, it's actually just a little bit skinnier than our cute little Pixel.
Oh,
so
it's very long though.
It's very tall. So I mean, you can see again, my Pixel is about to slide out and crash on the floor. So you can see just how much taller it is. But my Hobbit thumb ability to reach the edges of the display, it does not feel anywhere near as chunky as like a Note or a V60 or any of the other bigger screen devices. Sony's are currently only unlocked in North America. So my go-to for shopping them is B&H. B&H is, I think, one of the most consistent carriers. They've been showing up more frequently on Amazon this year. Last year, they took a while to get to Amazon. But you shop them out. I don't know exactly what carrier support these might have. I'm on T-Mobile, and they seem to play just fine on T-Mobile. I think the big bummer for someone considering an alt phone like a Sony is, because they don't play as hard with the North American carrier market, the Xperia 1 and 5 Mark II currently don't support United States 5G. So these will be LTE only devices in North America. In other regions in the EU, they're going to be 5G ready. It's just our 5G rollout is kind of a mess. And it doesn't seem like Sony wants to play ball with that right now.
You can get them at Best Buy too. I've seen them for sale in stores at Best Buy. I mean, like that. The question I have is that, like, so they're available. I just don't know why I don't see them on the subway more.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think Sony is definitely in a situation not unlike some of the other. I'm going to switch back to my main camera here.
Yeah,
Sony's in a situation where they're. I kind of feel like they're in a holding pattern. We look at companies like LG, where 2 years ago there was very little, almost no marketing. There was almost no. I mean, it was all just like YouTube and word of mouth. And this year for Sony felt like they were starting to pivot out of that. Not necessarily reaching out to like tech YouTubers, but there was a whole photography conversation happening online, and starting to see Sony kind of pick up and make smarter sort of pairings. If you shoot on Sony Alpha cameras. I went to a photography demonstration that was hosted by Sony, and they actually had workshops talking about the first Xperia 1 and how people were using them for short films. And so I feel like it's very bottom up. It's very grassroots. It's, they're rebuilding from those dark days where everyone was kind of decimated by the Snapdragon 810. It tanked HTC, it tanked LG, it tanked those Sony Zs and XZ phones. Their recovery has been very slow and kind of meandering, but Sony's ability to execute better internal collaboration with these departments is delivering, I think, one of the most interesting phones of the year. This is one of my favorite devices of this year. But I would also, my recommendation for it is a little bit more reserved. It's if you're a certain type of media or content creator, or you really like watching cinematic content on a juicy OLED. I'm not trying to make it sound like a $1,200 or $1,300 phone is like, oh yeah, you just go grab one of those at B&H and you're going to be great. But I really like having this as a solution where not a lot of attention's being played to that kind of pocket computer.